So good to have you both here. But can we start, please, with what went on at Downing Street in regards to this Netflix drama Adolescence? Look, Alex Phillips, I think it's a really good drama, okay? But it is a drama. The main character's ethnicity has been changed. I have literally seen quotes from one of the creators and writers admitting that. Why is this government treating it as if it is a documentary?
It's absolutely insane. I mean, the hyperbole surrounding what is a pretty average drama, I've watched it, it was okay, find it pretty boring in places. It's utterly ridiculous, but it's serving as a distraction technique. It's there because people find it very safe to criticize men, criticize boys, criticize teenage boys, and especially if they're white, that is okay. It means they get to do that. They get to sort of shower themselves with moral rectitude and be seen to be being assertive when it comes to social issues without actually having to go anywhere near the really hot potatoes, which is things such as knife crime, which is largely perpetrated by young black men, which is things such as the misogyny, which is endemic within the Muslim community. I mean, it's so much easier, isn't it, to go, oh, look, there's these young guys who are following Andrew Tate online and they're becoming incels and they're stabbing girls. This isn't happening every day. You know, the way that there's been this furore over this drama, you would think that there's a murder of a young girl every day at the hands of a teenage boy who likes Andrew Tate. It's for the birds. It's utter madness. And yet we're not having a conversation, are we, about other things that are utterly critical? If they wanted to protect young people, they would have acted a lot faster and look, with a lot more sort of assertiveness when it comes to pornography and the extremes of pornography that is getting into young people's hands. They've done nothing about that. They've tinkered around the edges. They could have easily just said, we're going to pull the plug on user-generated porn websites because they're pumping out content that is very harmful to young people. You know, it's gesture politics. And not only is it gesture politics, it is, you know, typically in line with the tropes and the safety of things that they feel they can talk about, which gets them off the hook of not talking about the things we need them to talk about.
So true. And Rafe, isn't this actually quite a dangerous psyop, though, given that now it is going to be played in schools and the clear message is, if you are a young white boy, you are responsible for the evils in Britain today.
Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely imagine, you know, the scenes in the classroom after one of these episodes finishes. You're going to have all these white boys feeling guilty and ashamed. You'll have the girls sort of sneering at them and despising them for misogyny and epitomizing everything that's bad about white male privilege. And you'll probably have the ethnic minority boys thinking, well, none of this applies to us, actually, so we can just sit back and ignore all of this. It's deeply insidious stuff. Of course, it's just the latest example of what we've seen for the last few years, where every time that the government or the police or indeed the Mayor of London puts out one of these public awareness videos about misogyny or about sexual harassment, even about gang rape, they of course cast a white male as the villain in all of this. And, you know, it's very funny when every other program you watch on television, they manage to shoehorn ethnic minorities into every white role. The one time you actually would expect to see an ethnic minority, it's actually a white person performing that role. The reason, of course, is quite clear. It's because it fulfills the liberal metropolitan elite worldview. Whenever there's an attack or something, it's always, of course, online content that's the problem, and it's deflection. As Alex was just saying there, we know the real issues here are, of course, Islamic extremism and the huge amount of misogyny that exists amongst Britain's Black and Asian communities. You know, Andrew Tate is always raised up by people who are criticizing what's happening with our youth today. You know, 80% of British male youth have heard of Andrew Tate. Only a quarter actually support him. And that quarter is overwhelmingly composed of people from our ethnic minority communities.
No, very, very good point. And then, Alex Phillips, we have the whole issue of free speech coming back to haunt this government. Do you remember Starmer in his Oval Office meeting saying, oh, no, we absolutely have free speech, getting furious about the fact that J.D. Vance had raised it. But then there is the case of Livia Tochichi Bolt being prosecuted for holding a sign near a Bournemouth abortion clinic. The sign simply read, "Here to talk if you want." And the State Department have gone on the record on this. So we don't have free speech now, and it could be costing the country dear.
Yeah, of course we don't have free speech. And the thing is, it's not just about prosecutions, which are harrowing and ghoulish enough that we now live in a country with effectively a Stasi in operation. You know, the scenes of that producer from Times Radio having the police come and bang on his door because he had criticised the school in a WhatsApp group. I mean, you can laugh at these things and say it's farcical. At the very least, it's a waste of police time. But the problem is we don't have free speech, and we're all aware of it, because every time we want to raise an issue, if we wanted to try and say, oh, guess what? Look, Andrew Tate actually converted to Islam. I wonder why. Probably because he loves a bit of misogyny. I might be able to say that on your show. I wouldn't dare say it on any other platform, even though it's true. I'm pretty sure what attracted him to that particular religion is the sort of very sort of firm patriarchal nature of it. But you can't say things like that, and you don't know why you can't say them. You just know you can't say them. So even if the police haven't come and knocked on our doors, we do all live within prisons inside our mind. And this isn't just about decency. This isn't just about kindness. This isn't just about being polite or being moderate in our views so as we don't incite any sort of hatred. This is about not even being able to raise topics, talk about issues that are now actively blighting society. And very often, more often than not, the people who end up as the victim of this are young women, because it's very often women's safety that is at risk when it comes to the attitudes of certain minority communities, and we're not allowed to criticize them. So, you know, I have this great umbrage, frankly. I'm fed up with feeling like my safety and my integrity comes last, that it's okay to throw me under the bus in order to protect some other people from synthetic offence. I mean, I'm a white person. Am I offended when someone says something about white people? No, I'm a grown-up, I'm an adult. And yet what we're seeing increasingly in today's society is overt racism towards white people, whether it's the botched sentencing guidelines that have now been postponed. You know, whether it's this case of free speech and that we can't criticize mass immigration or can't criticize the lack of integration in society. The fact that we're going to have rolled out an Islamophobia law, and yet there's no protections against Christians. And clearly there's another woman concerned about abortion, probably a Christian, who finds herself arrested for her religious views. I mean, this is what we've become now in 2025, and it's deeply disturbing.
It is deeply disturbing. I want to ask you, Rafe, about the comments that Nigel Farage made in regards to Reform UK and the vetting situation, which I've been doing quite a lot of reporting on. Now, I have real concerns about this. Obviously, there's been the big civil war going on. We've spoken about it a lot. But do you think it's sensible for Reform UK to say that if you have sworn a bit on your social media posts, that means you're disqualified from standing as a candidate? What about this this businesswoman, very successful businesswoman now, who has been rejected because at 16 years old, she was convicted of shoplifting? Now, I would say, actually, isn't that just a brilliant story about how you can turn your life around?
Yeah, no, on that point, I think you're absolutely right. And I think you would have to certainly look at each of these situations on a case-by-case basis. What degree of swearing are we talking about? I mean, nobody wants a proper foul-mouthed MP in Parliament, you know, somebody who's incapable of completing a sentence without one expletive or another. So you have to look at gradations, what words are being used in what context. And it's also a case, of course, how long ago this was. So certainly in the case of somebody who was arrested as a teenager, but has then become actually a role model and an example of how to turn one's life around, I would think that's just the sort of person you want to bring on board, particularly for reform. And I think there needs to be a lot of care taken here. It's understandable, and I fully appreciate why there is a need to professionalize the Reform Party to make it ready for government. But it has to be quite clear that by doing so, it's not alienating its core membership. And there's a big battle here, as you say, a civil war going on about all of that. It needs to ensure that it is ready and fit to take office if that's the case, but it can't jettison not only candidates who've been loyal servants of the party for so many years, but also, of course, those policies that the core base of reform cleave to so very much. You know, I mean, I'm firmly on the side of mass deportation of illegal immigrants, even voluntary remigration of naturalized citizens. Those are the core issues which I think the party was founded on, and it must make sure that it doesn't deviate too much from that. They're just lucky that Robert Jenrick isn't the leader of the opposition right now, because if Jenrick was the leader of the opposition, you would certainly be seeing reform perhaps not doing as well as
well,
it
he's
is doing
becoming
now.
a political superstar, actually, and the problem is he might outflank Nigel a little bit on the
Precisely.
right. Alex, Richard B in the live chat wants me to ask a question of you, but first I just want to show you, just to prove that it is real, it has happened. Rupert Lowe has raised £424,000 for his rape gang inquiry from 13,000 supporters. And Richard B asks Alex, please ask Alex if all of Rupert's supporters are still bots, as she suggested last week. Did bots raise £405,000 towards the grooming inquiry? You've got to admit, this is impressive, right?
But at no point did I say all of Rupert Lowe's supporters were bots. I did say that there's been a swarm of bot activity. That's now been proven, actually. A report was commissioned into looking at the online activity surrounding this confected division within the party, and it showed a huge amount of bot activity. In fact, the company that was used, which is the company that audited X on behalf of Elon Musk before he bought it to scan for bots, said that they'd never seen such a big or sophisticated bot campaign. I'm pretty sure that report is soon going to be released. I intimated on X myself that I'd spoken to industry insiders, because I know a lot of people who work in the field of cyber intelligence, and they had told me that they'd seen a huge amount of bot activity. It's now been proven. The report's been done. It's in the hands of Reform, so it's up to them to publish it. I didn't say that everyone who supports Rupert Lowe is a bot, but I think people do need to understand what has been at play here. There has been a deliberate augmentation of Rupert's profile. Look, I'm a fan of Rupert. I think he's great. We're a Brexit Party MEPs together. But there was a deliberate augmentation of his profile. There was a deliberate putting out around information that Nigel Farage was against immigration all of a sudden, which isn't true. Absolutely not. And then when there was this division that happened between the two, I think there have been tensions between the two for a long time. I don't know. I'm not in the middle of all of this. I don't want to be. But that also saw a huge amount of exacerbation, very deliberately by a very sophisticated and intent bot campaign, which has now ceased. I've noticed it's ceased because it's no longer bombarding me on my own timeline. The amount of abuse I got for, I don't know, having worked with Nigel for so long, for refusing to pick a side. I mean, what on earth am I supposed to do? I've known Nigel for pretty much all of my adult life. I'm a dear friend of his. I've known Rupert Lowe. We sat in Parliament together. You know, it's like parents divorcing or something. You don't have to pick between mum and dad. So just leave me out of it. But it is true that there was a sophisticated bot campaign. That is just the truth, okay? And like I said, when that report is published, I hope people do read it, and I hope that with that in mind, they question whether or not they got swept up in something that, yes, there is a fallout. Yes, something's gone on in that party that I don't fully understand. I'll never know all the details of it. Yes, it's a great tragedy that both sides, frankly, have behaved pretty appallingly in public when it comes to putting, articles in newspapers or press releases out. I mean, it's just, frankly, it's been rather unedifying for the party. But I hope we can all move on from this. Now, talking about Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry, I think it's a wonderful thing. He's taken this very seriously from the beginning, and I think it's a great incentive. What I would say is this: £424,000 is an astonishing amount of money. Unfortunately, inquirers tend to run into their millions. I'm not sure how far £400,000 is going to go. I think it's probably going to need to be a lot more than that if it's going to be able to be a full and thorough inquiry. But also, this inquiry is not going to have statutory powers, and that is a concern, because having statutory powers, if an inquiry has been initiated by the government, it means it has the legal powers to demand to speak to people, to get their testimonies, to be able to interview witnesses. And unfortunately, with something that doesn't have statutory powers, there is no incentive for anybody to have to go and speak to a lawyer or be part of this inquiry. So it will stymie the ability of what that inquiry can actually deliver. And I hope that they have considered this, and that Rupert has potentially another place he can send that money to if he finds out the inquiry can't really take place in any meaningful way. I don't know if it can. I think it's a great initiative in principle. And so this isn't a criticism of Rupert, but again, again, let's not let facts, suddenly become villains of the piece. The fact of the matter is it isn't a statutory inquiry. Inquiries tend to cost millions of pounds.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go wherever you are.